P90X is a fitness process that comes up a lot. I get patients that ask me about whether that's a good idea. These are generally people looking to do something at home for convenience, or they're not having to make another stop on their way home. It's also I've noticed, it tends to be people who have probably had some kind of athletic or fitness background. And so I've found myself over the years kind of giving advice specifically about P90X, which I thought was interesting. I've never bought the DVD series or subscribed online, but then as I've paid attention and noticed what has happened, I've seen quite a good number of people end up getting injured. So Josh, let's pretend like a patient came to me and said, hey, I want to start P90X. And I said, I got a great idea. Why don't you go get a trainer evaluation? So if I sent someone over to you, what approach would you take to helping them get ready for P90X training?
What I'm going to do is, after, of course, they've been consulted with their doctor, I'm going to do just a general assessment of them. So we're going to do a sit to stand. We're going to do some, range of motion tests, and we're going to do some pushing and pulling just to kind of see what's going to affect them. If they have any things they need to work on, things they need to look out for, if there's any movement patterns that injure them.
So do you talk to them about, if they've had recent surgery, or if they had a period where they laid off for a while? Do you gather that information also?
Oh yeah, there's a standard questionnaire. It's called a PAR-Q. It's what a lot of trainers will use. I've been doing this for 11 years now, and it's definitely kind of the baseline that I go with. Mm-hmm. It's just a general PAR-Q, and it gathers a lot of information about backgrounds, previous injuries, previous exercises they liked, previous ones they didn't like. So mm-hmm. Yeah, exercise is kind of a spectrum. So I tell people, like, as long as you stay inside of pretty standard guidelines, like, and you enjoy it, if you find something that you like and you're inside of that, like, you should go with it. Keep going that and progress it. Find a way to progress it.
If you like it, stick with it.
If you feel good, do it.
Exactly. So how would you give them advice to prevent injuring themselves at home?
Yeah. So exercise is one of those things that's as complicated or as easy as you want to make it. So I always talk about, there's this thing, have you ever heard about Milo and his ox? Ever heard that story?
Remind me.
Okay. Milo and his ox. So it's like a famous Greek proverb. So this guy Milo wants to get stronger, carries an ox across the field whenever it's a calf. As the calf grows, he does it every day. Calf grows with his strength, and he ends up being able to carry a full-blown ox across the field. It's just doing it a little at a time. He doesn't do it 10 times, he does it once. Mm-hmm. So it's about volume control. So volume being the total amount of exercise that you're able to do. It's just slowly turning that knob upwards. So a lot of times there are people jump in, if they're a former athlete, if they have a former background in exercising, then have a long time of sedentary lifestyle, mm-hmm. They'll try to jump in and just crank that knob right.
They go back to what they remember they could do.
Exactly. So that knob, they turn it back up to full blast whenever, in reality, they're like a 1 or a 2 at the time. So it's just slowly turning the knob. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the slowly part is something that we have trouble with. We want, especially, I've had people relate to me that they remember they used to be able to, run, a mile in whatever their time was, and they get back at it and they can't even get close, and they try to get there by the end of the month. Mm-hmm. And they forget that they didn't get there in a month in the first place. So we conveniently forget all the training. We remember whatever the achievement was, and that leads us into injury. This is actually one of the questions I ask people is, what do you want to get out of this? Mm-hmm. Right? And when I detect people trying to replicate glory days kind of stuff, I generally kind of go, okay, this is not a realistic approach. Also, you don't get gold stars for hitting that again. So what are you going to do regularly and consistently? Yeah. Why should a person, I get it that people want to work out at home. I understand the reasons for that. Why should a person have touch points with a personal trainer?
I mean, it's very similar to having You hire a health professional for the things that you're looking out for. It's the same with a fitness professional. So there are a bunch of bad trainers out there. Like, I'm sure there are maybe bad doctors. I don't know.
Couple.
I don't know. Maybe we don't want to talk about that. But, you do need to make sure that this is a vetted person, somebody who has a certification, somebody who does have some experience in whatever it is that you're going for. But hiring somebody to be with you along the journey that you're going on, that is health, it's a continuous thing that we're always striving for. It's definitely beneficial. It's something that you should. I don't see why you wouldn't have as many people on your team as possible. So
yeah, I definitely agree. If somebody's hip started bothering them as they were doing P90X, and they came to see you and said, "Hey, I want to keep working, but every time I do this certain exercise, my hip's just killing me." So now I know the kind of the common sense approach I would take to that, but give us a taste of what that would look like for you.
So this is kind of a fun thing. You were my doctor growing up. It's pretty fun. I don't know if anybody else in here knew that at the time, but you were my doctor growing up, and I legitimately remember you telling me, I was like, man, it really hurts whenever I do this. And you looked me in the eyes. I think I was like 14 and sitting on a fire truck, and I was 6'2". You were like, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. And I use that all the time.
Common sense, right?
It's common sense. So somebody's like, man, it really hurts whenever I do an incline press. Like, well, there's a million ways to exercise. If it hurts whenever you do a lunge in a certain way, but doesn't hurt when you do it in this other way, as long as it's within the spectrum of safety, why would you not do it
differently?
That way? Right.
So you're talking about the principle of modifying.
That's right.
And I've done enough. I've had enough fitness experiences. Let's say I've had a lot of things modified for me, and that's where I first learned what you're just saying. There's more than one way to do it, and unless someone has a P90X program that teaches them the modifications, and unless they have their own experience doing it differently, they may not realize there's another way to do it. So that's one of the things that I try to tell people is when you find something that's hurting you, stop doing it that way and either consult with someone who knows how to teach you how to modify it or figure out how to modify it. The other thing is P90X is a whole program. It encompasses the whole body. You've got the chest and back, you got the abs, the core, legs. So if you're having a problem in one body area, you can modify by repeating something from somewhere else. You could also do a shorter amount of time. You're not required to do all the exercises for all the time. I know they're encouraging you to do that with the video, but that's going to be the ideal. But especially as we're getting started or are easing into it or making sure this is sustainable, there's lots of ways to modify, not just by avoiding what hurts, but by paying attention to your body and just doing what you're able to at that moment.
Yeah, P90X is something that I've actually done before. I did it whenever I was in college. So I was in pretty good shape when I was in college. I actually didn't run into any problems. I remember enjoying that process. But that program is something that is easy. It's easy to overdo it in. It really is, especially right off the bat. So if you're not comfortable with your exercise progressions, if you're not comfortable with the variability of exercises and the ability to do, different movements for the same muscle group or whatever it happens to be, it can be definitely a tough pill whenever it comes to at-home workout programs. And that's just not P90X, that's workout programs in general.
Anything, exactly.
So if you have the ability to have a set of expert eyes on you, 100% you should. Why not?
So that's a good point you just made, expert eyes. Somebody who's skilled at looking at another human being doing a fitness movement or program and beginning to spot or see, you can see when one side is not keeping up with the other. You can see when, there's a weakness in a certain range of motion or a certain arc. And you can help that person, you can save them from injury in that moment and give them some ideas of ways they can modify. And that is, it's nearly impossible to train yourself.
It definitely is. I mean, I've been a strength and conditioning coach for, like I said, 11 years now, and I still have a coach that I have.
So you get coached yourself.
Absolutely. So he's a gentleman that's based out of Chicago. It's called Compound Performance. I record myself doing exercises. He sends me a workout program, and then it has different modifications inside of it when needed.
So he gives that to you. That's already built into what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a great program. It's something that I do with people as well. But the cobbler's children have the worst shoes. So like whenever it comes to me, it's kind of hard to take care of myself at times if I don't have somebody else
doing it.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that I try to point out to people when they come talk to me about this is I get it why you're trying to do it at home, but you still have to have someone check in and be sure you're not either practicing the wrong way, which is going to lead to an injury or a problem, or maybe your intensity level is not what it should be and you need some encouragement to pick it up. Maybe your intensity level is too high and someone needs to rein you in a little bit, but somebody's got to have eyes on at some point and say, and give some suggestions. I'm sure there's physicians out there that are great with fitness, but that's not typically most of us. And which is one of the reasons why I recommend that people get a good fitness coach, and for the period of time that they're learning something new, spend a session or two with that fitness coach.
Absolutely. It's also really easy for people, like if you grew up in a certain era and weren't comfortable with fitness. If you watch TV shows, you saw people like killing themselves to get in shape. If you watch Rocky, running up the steps, hitting on the meat bags. Right. Like I said, the bags there. Bags. But if you watch those things, you're like, oh man, this has to be like go all out every time. That's what fitness is. When really a lot of the time recovery is something that you also need to prioritize. And it's not something that, P90X does do a pretty good job of progressing things. You don't get alliteration like that in P90X, but there's lots of P's in that. But it does do a good job of progressing, but if you only know intensity and dive into that, and you don't have the skilled set of eyes with you or somebody that, one of the main things that I do in my career is talk people off of ledges whenever it comes to, fitness or health. There's a lot of fear that can come into that. Like, oh man, like I'm using the side a little too much. It's like, well, let's still go inside of those planes of motion that we're working with. Let's, try to shift over, but let's not freak out. Let's not panic. You feel good, you feel healthy. Let's keep just progressing forward and moving in. So that's
I like what you said there about recovery, because that's actually another area that I try to identify for people. There's a lot of people that it's beginning of the year, they've just set some lofty goals for themselves across, multiple areas of their life, and they're trying to hit them all and make them all happen. And they're trying to be real consistent with it. And before you know it, they're not really sleeping like they should. And they're taking some of their sleep time and putting it toward fitness. I'm going to get up early and exercise. And I still have the work that I have. And if they have children, that takes up time, period. Can't avoid that. And before you know it, their whole day is scheduled out and they never actually stop to rest. And talk to me about the importance of rest and recovery related to fitness.
It is not pressed enough how important it is to rest and recover. What I pay closest attention to with my clients that wear like some type of smartwatch is their heart rate variability, their HRV, and just their resting heart rate and how much that stuff has changed just throughout the day. That's something that if they have an elevated heart rate from what their normal resting heart rate is, I know that, okay, these, they may feel okay, but their body is telling me that they're not as rested as they are. It's a pretty clear indication. But rest isn't this big complicated thing. It's just sleep, drink some water, maybe go on a walk, little things like that go such a long ways. one of the things whenever it comes to rest and recovery, and it's the same with exercise in general, people spend a lot of time worrying about the wrong things. They stress about, man, I didn't do my cold plunge today, or I didn't do my sauna. Whenever in all reality, if they just slept a little longer,
Right.
that'd be pretty cool.
That'd
That'd be pretty cool.
That's the original,
Right.
right?
Yeah, like the fitness world is a game of attention and monetization just throughout. Just all of the health sectors are like that. So a lot of times the things that are pressed the most are the things that will make a big difference in the Ferrari of humans. Whenever most of us are some Cadillacs or something a little, goes at a little slower pace, is pretty reliable. I consider myself a Cadillac. So I don't worry about the, like nutrient timing is something that people push a lot. And when does that make a little bit of a difference? Yeah, but for the most part, if you're doing things that are like healthy and recoverable and like all of that stuff that are sustainable and good trends for you, it's probably more important than the little bit that this affects.
Biggest bang for buck kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what's the foundation?
Right.
Do you have a foundation? Because if you don't have a foundation, then all the frill stuff just ends up being window dressing. So on biometrics, do you encourage the people that you train to track themselves?
Absolutely. I encourage them to get blood work done regularly, talk to their doctor regularly, as well as, pay attention to what your body's telling you. We have more technology. We have a crippling amount of technology in the world right now. But if you enjoy that kind of thing and get a kick out of paying attention to your heart rate and your HRV or your any of your metrics, whenever it comes, any of your biometric markers for heart rate mostly, I definitely tell people to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's different, just even going back to the old scales and zones and all of those things to pay attention to, like, 50, 60% of your heart rate, whatever it happens to be.
Another good one that I really encourage people to get into is tracking their sleep. Yeah. So the phones, the watches, even the beds can track you these days. And I actually, when I'm doing an annual wellness visit, when I'm talking to someone about rest, fatigue, some certain types of blood results, I'll ask them to track their sleep for a while. It might not even be related directly to sleep, but sleep is a biometric that we can do a really good job of testing. Almost everybody sleeps every day, and most of us sleep in about the same place every day. And we've got the technology to review it. And that reminds me of a guy that came in this week, and he was telling me how terrible he slept, and he couldn't stay in deep sleep, and he kept popping out, and he just never could get rested. And I said, do you mind if I take a look at your... He was like, no, sure. And he pulled it up for me. It was fabulous. It was absolutely amazing. He just hadn't understood yet how to read what was going on. He didn't know that no one stays in deep sleep all night, and that his pattern was actually very healthy. His heart rate variability was astounding. His sleep heart rate was in the 40s. Like, this dude is super healthy. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing, I'm hoping that I changed his perspective, just change that. And maybe now he can look at these nights and go, by the way, he had 100% and stars everywhere. He didn't see that. He saw, I'm not sleeping deeply every night. So we'll see what happens. But I do encourage people to get to know their body better by tracking something other than their weight, which is one of the least helpful things to track.
Yes, completely agree with that.